I'm looking today at a strategy that I found in this video from Traders Landing. I will leave a link in the description to the original video where Traders Landing describes the strategy and also goes through a test of the results. This strategy uses the Pivot Point Supertrend, which I created in two earlier videos, one for MetaTrader 4 and one for MetaTrader 5, because you'll need that indicator and it doesn't come naturally with MetaTrader. If you haven't seen those videos, I'll also leave a link to both the MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5 versions of that indicator. If you don't have the indicator and you would like to obtain a copy so that you can at least build this expert, then I'll also leave a link where you can download a compiled version of the Pivot Point Supertrend for MetaTrader. Before I go too much further, after I released the videos on the Pivot Point Supertrend, I've had a number of people tell me that there have been differences in the results from the MetaTrader version and the TradingView version. I have checked the code many times and I cannot find a fault. That doesn't mean there isn't one, I simply cannot find it. And all of the differences that I can find come down to a difference in the prices between the MetaTrader feed and the feed used by TradingView. The indicator itself uses ATR extensively, and I'm finding that there is a difference in the ATR on MetaTrader and TradingView, and that difference can be attributed to differences in the high and low prices from the two feeds. So they will create differences in the results. But as far as I know, the indicators are working correctly on MetaTrader. If you do happen to find in the earlier videos a coding error, then please let me know and I'll do my best to correct it. But at the moment, I believe that the code is correct and matches what is being written in TradingView. I also mentioned in the earlier video, I pointed out that I think there is a fault in the TradingView indicator. I'm not certain of it because it may be by design, but I showed how to write the indicator with or without what I perceived as the fault. The download that I have available has that possible fault included, so it more closely matches the TradingView indicator. And it's a fault that only means that the value of the support and the resistance lines at the beginning of a switch, after you change from support to resistance or resistance to support, those values are different. But the places where those changes happen aren't affected, although they may be different if you have different high and low prices in your feeds, as I mentioned a minute ago. I've had some feedback that when I create videos that incorporate both MetaTrader 4 and MetaTrader 5, it can get confusing as I switch between the two. So I'm actually producing two separate videos here, one for MetaTrader 4 and one for MetaTrader 5, and each one will cover the complete expert advisor for the MetaTrader 4 or the MetaTrader 5 version. This video is for MetaTrader 4. I have already released a video for the MetaTrader 5 version, and I'll include a link in the description where you can find the MetaTrader 5 version of this expert. I want to also mention that Traders Landing talks about some possible improvements to the strategy. I haven't included any of those improvements in the code that I'm creating here today. And that's for two reasons. Some of those improvements are not extremely well defined, and given that they were just suggestions, I didn't want to incorporate them in this code. But also, the number of combinations of those suggestions that I would have to cover would have made this too confusing and too lengthy. So I have stuck to the original strategy as I understand it from the Traders Landing video. There are a couple of points where I've noted in the video here that his description doesn't necessarily match the examples shown and where I've made some assumptions, so I've pointed those out as we go through the rest of the video. And before we get into the code, let me ask you, please click the like button and click subscribe. That helps us enormously. It gets us up the YouTube rankings and helps people to find our videos. So now let's get straight into the code and see how this works. Now I've opened the MetaTrader 4 editor and I've already used the wizard to create an outline of the expert advisor, and I've made some modifications to the comments and the layout. So I've just inserted here briefly the strategy that I'll be following, and this strategy comes from the Traders Landing video and I've left the link here. These standard statements, properties, copyright, link, version and strict, they're all inserted by the wizard. And it's also inserted this on init and on tick. Now, depending on the options you chose, you may have some additional functions here, or you may be missing some of these. If you're missing either of these, you can just type these in. If you have some extras, then we just won't be using them. So you can either leave them or delete the functions. As I go through this, I'm going to be creating some additional custom functions, and when I need those, I'll put the code in here to call the custom function, then I'll just jump down and show you how that custom function works and then come back. Now the first thing here, this is going to be using the custom Pivot Point Supertrend indicator. So I've just got some define and resource statements here. First, the define statement, the PPS indicator path, and this is my path including the indicators folder, indicators, orchard, PPS, pivot point supertrend.ex4. So that's the path to the compiled indicator for Pivot Point Supertrend. Then a resource statement where I'm just adding the backslash, and it's a double backslash here because remember a backslash is a special character. So backslash plus PPS indicator path, that's this here, and then define PPS indicator as double colon plus the path. Now I'm doing this rather than simply calling the path name in the iCustom function. And if you want to know why, I have an earlier video that explains why I do this rather than just include this path name in the iCustom function. And I'll leave a link to the earlier video on screen and in the description. Now, the strategy uses 3 indicators, 2 moving averages and the supertrend. So first I need some inputs to define those moving averages and the supertrend. I don't like to rely on just setting the defaults for these experts. The defaults on the inputs will be the default settings for the strategy, but you will at least be able to override them in the input statements. So these first 3 lines, there's the input confirmation moving average bars, moving average method and applied price. So that's the confirmation, that's the 200 EMA. And then I have the stop loss EMA, again with bars, method and applied price. Now both of these are defaulting to a mode EMA and to price close. And then I have the inputs for the supertrend, the PP bars, which is the number of bars to search for a pivot point. So a pivot point must be the highest or the lowest within this many bars to either side. Then the ATR factor, which is a multiplier, and number of ATR bars. So these are the defaults for this strategy. Then I just need some standard inputs for placing trades. And this is just a magic number, a trade comment, and I'm using a fixed volume here of 0.01. You may want to change this, it's up to you. I just do this for tutorial purposes. I also need to keep track of the current trade that's been placed, the direction of that trade. So I'm going to do that with this current trade variable, and that's of enum order type. So this will either be a buy or a sell depending on the current trade that's open. And when there is no trade, I'll simply set that to -1. And so at the very beginning in the onInit, I will initialize current trade to -1. I could have simply done that here in this statement, current trade equals -1, but I prefer to initialize these specifically. Into the onTick function, and this is where all the real work happens. Now first I'm just declaring this static double SL, that's the stop loss, we'll get to that in a moment. But then I'm also declaring this variable new bar, and that's equal to the result of the function is new bar. Now I'm capturing the value into this new bar variable because I'm going to be using it more than once in this function, and the call to is new bar will only return true the first time it's called on any new bar. So I need to capture the value here. As I said, let's just jump down and have a look at the is new bar function. This is my isNewBar function. I use this quite a lot. You've probably seen it before. I declare a static date time variable. This is called previous time. And in this case, I'm initializing it to 0. And then a date time variable current time, which is itime symbol period 0, which gives me the opening time for the current bar. And then I can compare previous time and current time. And if they're the same, then I know I haven't created a new bar. And if they're different, then it means that a new bar is open. So current time has moved on to the start of the next bar, where previous time, because it's a static, will have remembered the value from before. So if previous time equals current time, simply returns false, which means it's not a new bar. And if we fall through to this line, then I set previous time to be the same as current time and return true, because it is a new bar. And then next time I come in here, because this is a static variable, previous time will have the value of that current time, which is the start of the current bar. So by setting this to 0, I'm also forcing this function to return true the first time it's called. If you want to write a function like this that returns false the first time, let's say you want to return false if you started the expert in the middle of a bar, then you would move this line and initialize previous time to the value of current time. So just move it down by 1 and say previous time equals current time. But in this case, I want to return a true on the first bar, so I'm setting it to 0, which means first time through this statement is false. Then I assign current time into previous time, and then I return true. So that's the isNewBar function, and you can see why if I called this a second time inside this function, it would return false. So I'm capturing that in this new bar variable. And now I want to set a value for this stop loss. And here's the first use of new bar. And this is because the stop loss is going to be used on every tick, but it only changes when the bar changes. You can see here I'm using the IMA function, symbol, period, bars, 0 for shift, method, and applied price. And I'm getting the value for bar number 1. So it's going to be the same every tick except when there's a new bar. So there's no point in recalculating this every time. It just saves resources to only do this once on each bar change. And that's why the SL is also a static variable. So it will be recalculated here, and each other time it comes into this function, it will just remember the value that was there previously. The next thing I want to do then is apply the trailing stops. I need to apply trailing stop on every tick because I'm just waiting for the price to touch that stop loss point. So here I'm using the current trade variable that we set up earlier, and we'll see how that gets set. But if current trade is greater than or equal to 0, that means I have a trade. So we initialized it to -1 here. If we have a current trade, then I'm going to apply the trailing stop to that current trade. And I pass in the current trade, which is just a type, and the stop loss value. Let's just go down to the bottom and I'll put in that trailing stop function. So trailing stop, enum order type, and there's an ampersand here. I'm passing this in by reference because if I do actually apply trailing stop and close a trade, I'm going to reassign that type, which will reassign this current trade here. So I'm passing that by reference and then the double stop loss. So first, if the type is an order type buy, then I need the bid price because that's the price where we'll be closing trades. And I get that just with the symbol info double symbol and symbol underscore bid. And if the bid price is less than or equal to the stop loss, so I'm buying, the bid has dropped below the stop loss, therefore I want to close. And I call this close all function that we'll also write in a moment, passing in that order type buy and returns a type. So if the close all function succeeds, then it returns a -1, and if it doesn't succeed, then it returns the type again. Then I do the same thing for sell. If type is equal to order type sell, in this case though I want the ask price with symbol underscore ask, and if the ask price is greater than or equal to the stop loss, so I'm in a selling mode and the price has risen past the stop loss, then again type equals close all, order type sell. So let's look at the close all function. Now, close all, the only way that this particular strategy closes trades is on that stop loss. So I don't need to worry about this for anything except the stop loss. The arguments to this are an enum order type, which has been called as either an order type buy or a sell, and it returns an enum order type. And I'm going to be returning this result. So I'm declaring an enum order type result equals -1. So remember, -1 means nothing's open. And that's what I'll be returning if I successfully close everything. Then a simple loop for int I equals orders total -1, while I is greater than or equal to 0, I minus. So I'm stepping down through all of the trades that are open or through all of the orders. And then I attempt to call order select, passing in the position and select by position or select by pos mode trades. And if that is unsuccessful, so I have a not here, if that is unsuccessful, then I set the result equal to type, that's the type that's been passed in, and continue. So I've initialized result to -1. If this fails, then it might mean that I've missed an order that I should have closed. So I can't be confident that I've closed everything, and so I simply continue here. After resetting result to type, that will be returned, and so that will retain the value of the current type. If I do manage to successfully select that order, so continue will simply move to the end here and go back to the next iteration of the loop. I then need to check if the order symbol is equal to the current chart symbol, if the order magic number is the input magic number, if the order type is equal to the type passed in, which is buy or sell. Then I attempt to close the order with the order close function, and the arguments to that are order ticket, which gets the value of the ticket from the currently selected order. Order lots gets the number of lots from the currently selected order, and order close price actually gets the current appropriate closing price from this order. And a slippage of 0 here. If that is unsuccessful, again I have this not statement. If I can't order close, then the same thing here, result equals type. So assuming I can select every order that I have available, and that I can close all of the orders that match the symbol, magic number, and type, then result will simply still be -1. And at the end, I just return result. So what that means, if I'm able to close all, then I'll return -1. And if I'm not, or I'm uncertain because I couldn't select something, then I'll return this type again. Okay, so that finishes off close all, which is called by trailing stop, so that finishes the trailing stop function. And you can see here, if current trade is greater than or equal to 0, call trailing stop, and because current trade is passed by reference, if trailing stop actually does close the trades, then current trade will be set to -1, and so we'll skip that in future. Now the trailing stop is something that I want to be applying on every tick because I want to close the trades as soon as the price hits that stop loss point. The rest of this code is about opening new trades, and I don't need to perform those functions unless I do have a new bar. So this is where I'm again using that new bar variable, and that's why I've captured to a variable instead of using the function, because I'm using it here and here, and I'm simply saying if this is not a new bar, return. And now something that I did not see mentioned in the video about this strategy, but I'm going to assume that if there is already a current trade, then I should not create a new trade. So I've added this statement, if current trade is greater than or equal to 0, return. And now I just want to capture some additional values that I'll be using to decide if I need to open a new trade. And the reason I've separated this, I've got these variables captured down here and the stop loss up here. I actually need the stop loss here because I'm going to be processing the trailing stop on every tick, but I don't need these unless this is a new bar and I need to decide whether to open a trade or not. So to save computer resources, I only set up these values on a new bar. So the confirmation is a simple one. This is just the IMA for the confirmation MA bars. Still using 0 as the shift, and then the confirmation method and confirmation applied price for bar number 1. The bar that has just closed is bar number 1. I also need the last closing price, so that's just the iClose function, symbol period bar number 1. And then I need the Pivot Point Supertrend values for the resistance and support for not only bar number 1 but also bar number 2. These are just calls to the iCustom function. Symbol and period passed in, the name of the file. So this is the name of the ex4 file, and you'll note that we set that up earlier. Let me go back again. We set this up here, and you can see it's got this double colon in front. That's the method for calling a resource file, and I've set that up as a resource here. So this is a call to the custom ex4 file, and then the arguments to that, which are the number of pivot point bars, the ATR factor, and the ATR bars, and then the buffer number. I know, because we've written this in the last two videos, that the resistance value is in buffer number 0 and the support value is in buffer number 1. So I'm calling buffer number 0 here, buffer number 1, bar number 1 first, and then the same repeated for bar number 2. And so those values go into resistance and support, number 1 and number 2. I need these because I need to know if we've switched from support to resistance or resistance to support, and so I need to compare each of these to the value from the bar number 2. And now I come to the tests to determine if I need to open a trade. Now, starting with the long entry, and this again is something that's not mentioned in the strategy, or at least it's not stated explicitly, but when I look at the examples it appears to work this way. The strategy simply states that the current price, or the last close price, must be above the confirmation and the stop loss. But in all the examples, the stop loss is also above the confirmation, although it's not stated that that must be the case. So I've taken it that that is true, and I need confirmation first, stop loss above confirmation, and last close above stop loss. If you believe that that's not necessary, then here is the alternate line, which simply says that last close is greater than stop loss and last close is greater than confirmation. And this would allow stop loss to be below the confirmation. But I'm going to go with this for now. And the confirmation has come from here, and last close has come from here. So if bar number 1 has closed above the stop loss value, which we set up right at the beginning, and the stop loss is above the confirmation value, then that's the first step to deciding if we need to open a trade. And the next tests are to determine whether we've switched from a resistance to a support. So if PPS support 1 is not equal to empty value, that means that we do have support at number 1. If PPS support 2 is equal to an empty value, then we did not have support at bar number 2, which means we must have had resistance, and therefore we have just switched from resistance to support, and that's a key part of the strategy, to open trades provided the stop loss, the confirmation, and the last close are aligned. If we switch to a support, then that's a trigger to buy. And then I call the open trade function, which returns a trade type, or it will return order type buy if it's successful, and then I put that into current trade so that we know we have a buy trade open. So I call the open trade function, passing in the type and the stop loss value. I'll just write the sell side before we go to the open trade function, because it's just the same as this, but things are reversed. So for the short entry, if the stop loss is less than the confirmation and the last close is less than the stop loss. So simply reversing the signs here. And the same alternative, which doesn't test that they are all in alignment, just that the close is below the stop loss and the confirmation. Here, instead of testing PPS support, I'm testing resistance. So if resistance 1 is not an empty value and resistance 2 is equal to empty value, then it means we've switched to resistance. And that's the trigger to sell. But then the same call, current trade equals open trade, and this time I just pass the order type sell. And so now let's just write this open trade function. I'll just go to the bottom of the code to do that. It returns an enum order type, so if this is successful, it will return the type of the trade that's been opened. And the two arguments, of course, are the order type, I'm calling type, and the stop loss value. I need the price where I open the trade, so double price equals, and then if the type is an order type buy, then I'm getting the symbol info symbol to get the ask price. If it's not an order type buy, it must be a sell, and then I use the symbol _ bid to get the bid price. So that gives me the opening price. To open that trade then, order send, symbol, type, input volume, the price, zero slippage, the stop loss, zero take profit, trade comment, and the magic number. Order send will return a ticket number. If it is greater than 0, so I have here the test, if order send is greater than 0, then I simply return type, and that will tell me that I now have a trade open of this type. If order send returns 0 or less, then I haven't successfully opened the trade, and I'll just return -1. Now I think that should be everything. Let me just compile. That worked. One thing I will mention before we go too much further. I should have mentioned it earlier. If I go back here to the resource statement. If you did watch the earlier videos, you will know that I placed the Pivot Point Supertrend .mq4 and ex4 in a folder called Pivot Point Supertrend, and here I've changed that to PPS. That is because there is a limit on the length of the string that can be passed to this resource statement, and that limit is 63 characters. So I've just shortened the path here. I've actually moved it and renamed the path so that I can fit that into the resource statement. Now I'll just run this through the backtester. Traders Landing tested this on an Ethereum Bitcoin cross over 100 trades and achieved a 184% return. My demo accounts that I'm using here don't have an Ethereum Bitcoin cross, and even if I look at other cryptos, I just don't have enough history to show anything reasonable. So I'm going to fall back to $1 Swiss here for all of the year 2021, from 2021 January 1 up until 2022 January 1. And I've got the 30-minute time frame set, and that matches the 30-minute time frame that Traders Landing used. But obviously I'm using a different symbol, and I don't know the date range that he tested on. But let's just run this and see the results we get. All right, so over that full year, we've lost a little. We had some gains in the beginning of the year, then some steady losses, a few more gains and some steady losses. Let's look at the report on that. The modeling quality not applicable, so I'm not really sure how good this result is. It shows that we've had a net loss of $4.42, so pretty close to a break even. Now I'll point out, backtesting results are unreliable, and in real life you may achieve a much better result than this. You may also be able to turn this expert on and off depending on market conditions, so you might be able to manually improve the results here. And this is not to say that the 184% was not achieved by Traders Landing, because I simply don't have the same symbols and I don't know all of the settings that he used in terms of the date range. But this is just to show that it at least runs in MetaTrader 4, and you can take the code now and test this on any symbols that you like. And that's all we have for this. Thank you for watching.